Hello, curious minds, and welcome to this intellectual journey. Today, we're not talking about just any book. We're going to talk about the book that, according to many, invented the way we tell stories. A book written over 400 years ago in prison by a one-armed soldier. We're talking about Don Quixote de la Mancha and the genius who created it, Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. But why does this story still matter? What does a madman who mistakes windmills for giants have to say to us here in the 21st century? That's the big question we'll explore today. The answer, I'll tell you up front, is everything. Cervantes didn't just write an entertaining story, he handed us the instruction manual for the modern human being with all our contradictions, idealism, and raw reality. It's the birth of literary humanism. Before we dive in, a quick note. To bring this narrative to life, I've used AI tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and atmosphere of what we're discussing. They won't always be a literal representation, but rather a visual companion to help your imagination soar with me. I sincerely hope you enjoy it. To understand the work, we first have to understand the man. Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra wasn't an academic locked away in a library. He was a man of action, of failures, and of astonishing resilience. He was born in 1547 in a Spain that was the superpower of its time, the empire on which the sun never set. But Cervantes' life wasn't one of imperial glory. He was a soldier, fighting valiantly in the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, the greatest naval battle of its time. There he was shot 3 times, 2 in the chest and 1 that shattered his left hand, rendering it useless. He proudly called it the hand of the cripple. As if that weren't enough, on his way back to Spain, his ship was captured by Barbary pirates. Cervantes spent 5 years as a slave in Algiers. 5 long years. He attempted to escape 4 times, taking sole blame to protect his comrades. This experience of captivity, of seeing life pushed to its limits, would profoundly shape his worldview. Eventually, his family and the Trinitarian friars gathered the ransom money for his release. He returned to Spain, but the glory of Lepanto didn't do him much good. He became a tax collector, a hated profession. He was either a bad administrator or perhaps too honest, and ended up in jail several times for debt and irregularities in his accounts. And it's here in a Seville prison, according to legend, where Don Quixote was conceived. Think about that for a moment. The most luminous, most free, and most entertaining book in history was conceived in the darkness of a prison by a man who had lost almost everything. This isn't just biography, it's the key to the work itself. Cervantes doesn't write from an ivory tower. He writes from failure, from wounds, from captivity. He writes from a profound understanding that life is a tragicomic mix of grand dreams and miserable realities. And that, my friends, is the essence of humanism. Now let's set the stage in the literary world Cervantes found himself in. What were people reading in the 1600s? The answer is simple. They were devouring chivalric bestsellers. Amadis of Gaul was the Harry Potter or Game of Thrones of its day. These were addictive stories. But what were these books really about? They were tales of perfect knight-errants, incredibly strong, always virtuous, who battled giants, dragons, and entire armies. They rescued perfect damsels, and their worlds were pure fantasy, without nuance. The characters were completely flat. The hero was always good, the villain always evil. There was no doubt, no existential crisis, no humanity. They were archetypes, not people. Literature was entertainment, yes, but it was also a form of absolute escapism from reality. Cervantes saw this and recognized 2 things. First, its addictive power. Second, its profound danger. The danger of believing the world is so simple that life conforms to those perfect narratives. He saw that this literature didn't prepare people for real life, it confused them. Furthermore, literary genres were kept in separate, sealed boxes. You had epic for heroes, lyric for idealized love, and picaresque for low-born anti-heroes. They didn't mix. A noble couldn't be ridiculous, and a peasant couldn't possess profound wisdom. Cervantes then decided to do something radical. His initial plan, or at least the one he declared, was to write a parody, a mockery to bring into contempt among men the feigned and foolish stories of chivalric romances. He wanted to use laughter to destroy the genre. Thus was born Alonso Quijano, a village hidalgo, a middle-aged man, thin and a bit pathetic. A man who reads so many of these books that literally his brains dry up and he loses his mind. He decides that he himself will become a knight-errant. He dons rusty armor inherited from his great-grandparents, names his skinny horse Rocinante, and invents a lady to be in love with, Dulcinea del Toboso, who is actually a local peasant woman who doesn't even know he exists. And of course he gives himself a new name, Don Quixote de la Mancha. But this is where Cervantes' magic happens. The moment Don Quixote steps into the world, the book that was meant to be a simple parody transforms. The character completely takes over the initial plan, It becomes something much grander, more complex, and more profound. Why? Because Cervantes, instead of just ridiculing him, decides to take him seriously. He decides to explore what it means to see the world through a lens of idealism, even if that lens is madness. And to contrast that madness, he needs reality. And that reality has a name, Sancho Panza. And with this, my friends, Cervantes invents the modern novel. What do I mean by modern novel? It's not just that it's a long story, it's the way it's told. Cervantes breaks all the rules of his time and creates a literary artifact of astonishing complexity that remains so today. First ingredient and the most revolutionary, the mixing of genres. In Don Quixote, you have everything. You have chivalric parody, of course. But you also have pastoral love stories, picaresque novel elements, philosophical discourses, literary criticism. It's a hodgepodge. Cervantes doesn't respect those sealed boxes. In his book, high culture and low culture converse. Nobles talk with peasants, priests argue with innkeepers, and madmen speak the sanest truths. Everything is mixed together, exactly like in real life. The Russian critic Mikhail Bakhtin called this polyphony, meaning many voices. Before Cervantes' books had a single voice, that of the author, telling you what to think. In Don Quixote, all voices have their own truth. The priest has his truth, the barber his, Sancho his, and Quixote his. Cervantes doesn't tell us who is right, he presents us with the debate. He forces us, the readers, to navigate this ambiguity. He treats us like adults. This is perhaps the first time in literary history that the reader is an active participant, not a passive receiver. Second ingredient, the creation of round characters. Unlike the flat characters of chivalric romances, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza change. They evolve, they learn from each other, they feel pain, doubt, fear, and joy. They are, in a word, human. Sancho starts as a simple, greedy peasant who only follows Quixote for the promise of an insula, an island to govern. Quixote begins as a madman disconnected from reality. But look what happens by the end of the novel. It's an astonishing transformation. Third ingredient, metafiction. This is a fancy word for fiction about fiction. Cervantes is constantly breaking the fourth wall, reminding us that we're reading a book. This is incredibly modern. For example, Cervantes pretends that he isn't the author. He pretends he found the manuscript of the story, written in Arabic by a Moorish historian named Cide Hamete Benengeli. And throughout the book, the narrator sometimes interrupts to complain about how poorly Cide Hamete is telling the story. This creates a dizzying sensation. Who is telling the story? Who is the author? Is it Cervantes? Is it the narrator? Is it Cide Hamete? The answer is all of the above. Cervantes is playing with the very nature of authorship and truth. He tells us don't blindly trust the narrator. The peak of this metafiction comes in the second part of Don Quixote, published in 1615. And here the story goes wild. In 1614, an anonymous author under the pseudonym Avellaneda published a fake sequel, A Pirate Quixote. Cervantes, instead of just getting angry, does something brilliant. He incorporates the fake book into his own sequel. In the second part, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza find out that someone has written a book about them. Not only that, but they discover there's a fake sequel about them. There are scenes where Don Quixote encounters characters who have read Avellaneda's fake book and tell him, "But you're not the real Don Quixote. The one in the book says otherwise." It's the first time in history that characters in a work of fiction are aware of being fictional characters. This is something we see today in films like Deadpool or The Matrix. Cervantes did it 400 years ago. He was deconstructing fiction while inventing it. He was showing us that the line between reality and fiction is incredibly thin and permeable. So let's recap. Polyphony, genre mixing, evolving round characters, and metafiction. These aren't just literary tricks. They are the tools with which Cervantes builds his vision of humanism. Let's talk about that humanism. When we think of the Renaissance, we think of an optimistic humanism centered on the perfection of man, like Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Man is the measure of all things. It's an idealized vision. Cervantes lived a bit later, in a darker, more disillusioned period, the Baroque. His humanism isn't about perfection, it's about imperfection. It's a humanism that accepts the human being not as they should be, but as they are, with all their madness, contradictions, failures, and dignity. Cervantes' greatest invention isn't the novel, it's the character of Don Quixote. Why? Because Don Quixote is the first modern hero. And what defines the modern hero? Failure? Think about it. Throughout the entire novel, Don Quixote doesn't win a single fight. He is constantly beaten, humiliated, and ridiculed. Ancient heroes like Hercules or Amadis always won. Their greatness lay in their success. Don Quixote's greatness lies in his insistence. His nobility isn't about conquering the world, but about refusing to accept the world as it is. It lies in his ability to imagine a better world. Don Quixote looks at an inn, a dirty and miserable lodging, and sees a castle. He looks at a prostitute and sees a maiden. He looks at a windmill and sees a giant. The question Cervantes asks us isn't just, is he mad? The question is, who is crazier, the one who sees the world as it is and resigns themselves, or the one who sees the world as it should be and tries to change it? He is the idealist. He is the man who believes that will and imagination can transform reality. And the world, time and again, proves him wrong. It knocks him to the ground. But he, time and again, gets up bruised and blames the evil enchanters who have transformed the giants into windmills. This is a powerful metaphor. How many times do we prefer to blame an external conspiracy rather than accept that our dream was simply impossible or misguided? Don Quixote is the father of all dreamers, of all romantics, of all those who fight for a lost cause. And then we have Sancho Panza. If Quixote is idealism, Sancho is materialism. He is pure realism. He is short, fat, illiterate, cowardly, and gluttonous. His philosophy is simple. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and with a full belly, one thinks better. In any previous book, Sancho would have been a mere jester, a buffoon for the hero to shine against. But Cervantes gives him unprecedented dignity and depth. Sancho is the voice of common sense. When Quixote attacks the windmills, Sancho is the one who shouts, "Look, your worship, those are windmills and not giants." Sancho is the anchor that keeps the novel grounded. He sees the blood, feels the pain, gets hungry. He represents the body, basic needs, raw reality. Without Sancho, Don Quixote would be a fantasy. Without Quixote, it would be a cynical chronicle. But the true genius isn't in the two characters separately. It's in their dialogue. Don Quixote is, in essence, a long, very long conversation between two friends who couldn't be more different. And it's in that conversation where the magic happens. At first, Sancho only follows Quixote out of self-interest. But little by little, something happens. Sancho begins to admire his master's nobility, his selflessness, his unwavering faith in an ideal. He starts to be infected by his madness. There comes a point in the second part when Sancho, to please his master, lies to him. He tells him he's seen Dulcinea and describes her, but describes her poorly, and Quixote despairs. The idealist clashes with the realist's poor imagination. At another point, Sancho comes to believe so much in magic that when he sees his master defeated, it's he who tries to cheer him up, suggesting it must be the work of enchanters. This process is called the Quixotization of Sancho. The realist begins to dream, and the opposite also occurs. It's the Sanchification of Don Quixote. Through their conversations, Quixote begins to absorb Sancho's common sense. He starts to doubt. His madness becomes more intermittent. He begins to value friendship, food, and rest more than adventures. Cervantes is showing us that the ideal human being is neither the pure idealist, Quixote, nor the pure realist, Sancho. The complete human being is the tension between these two poles. We are a mix of dreams and flesh. We need ideals for life to have meaning, and we need reality to be able to live it. This pairing, the mad idealist and his sane, realistic companion, is the most copied invention in the history of fiction. Think of Sherlock Holmes and Watson, Frodo and Sam, Han Solo and Luke Skywalker. Almost any buddy movie duo. All of them, in some way, are children of Quixote and Sancho. And what about Dulcinea del Toboso? She's a fascinating character because, in reality, she isn't a character. She never appears. She's an idea. She's Quixote's cause. In reality, she's Aldonza Lorenzo, an ill-tempered peasant woman who probably smells of garlic. But for Quixote, she is the most beautiful princess in the world. He needs her to exist to justify his actions. This is a subtle critique of courtly love, but also a profound reflection on idealism. Sometimes we fall in love not with the person, but with the idea we project onto them. Cervantes is also surprisingly modern in his female characters. In an era where women were either saints or prostitutes, Cervantes creates strong, intelligent, and independent women, like Marcella, the shepherdess, who delivers an incredible speech about her right not to love anyone and to be free. This brings us to the novel's great central theme, which remains the theme of our own lives, the tension between reality and perception. What is real? What we see with our eyes? Or what we believe we see? It's a deeply philosophical question. The windmill episode is the most famous. For everyone else, they're windmills. For Quixote, they're giants. He attacks, the windmill strikes him and throws him through the air. Reality wins. And here's Cervantes' genius, Quixote doesn't give up. He gets up and reinterprets reality to fit his fiction. He claims that the wise Friston, his enemy, transformed them into windmills at the last second to rob him of glory. He imposes his narrative on reality. We can't help but wonder, who among us doesn't do this every single day? We don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. Our fears, our desires, our ideologies color everything we perceive. Cervantes was the first to articulate this so clearly. He showed us that reality isn't a solid, objective thing, but something that is constantly negotiated. There's another key episode. Quixote and Sancho see a cloud of dust. Quixote claims they are two great armies about to battle. Sancho only sees sheep. They get closer, and indeed they are two flocks of sheep. Quixote attacks the sheep thinking they are soldiers, and the shepherds throw stones at him. Again, the idealist clashes with reality. But this episode is deeper. Quixote begins to name the knights of each army. He invents entire genealogies. He is literally creating an epic narrative out of nothing. It's the power of human imagination in its most pathetic and sublime version. This clash between fiction, Quixote's madness, and reality, Sancho's sanity, is the engine of the novel. But Cervantes is too clever to give us an easy answer, because sometimes Quixote's madness turns out to be more noble and paradoxically more true than the sanity of others. The sane people in the novel, the dukes, the priests, the barbers, are often cruel. They mock Quixote. They play cruel jokes on him. They treat him like a circus animal for their own amusement. They are cynical and empty. In contrast, Quixote's madness has a purpose and ethics. Cervantes asks us, who is the real madman? The man who believes himself a knight and acts with honor, justice, and compassion? Or the sane society that finds him ridiculous and is based on cynicism, self-interest, and cruelty? It's a question that resonates to this day. The other great Cervantine theme is freedom. It's no coincidence that Cervantes spent 5 years in captivity. Freedom is the central theme of his life and his work. At one point, Don Quixote tells Sancho, "Freedom, Sancho, is one of the most precious gifts that heaven has bestowed upon men." And he's not just talking about physical freedom. He's talking about the freedom to be oneself. The freedom to choose who you want to be, even if the world tells you it's ridiculous. Don Quixote's madness is, at its core, his supreme act of freedom. He decides not to be Alonso Quijano, the boring hidalgo, and instead to be Don Quixote, the adventurer. There's a marvelous episode where Don Quixote frees a group of prisoners, galley slaves, who are chained to galleys. He asks them about their crimes, and they all make excuses. One says he was imprisoned for being in love, another for singing, confessing under torture. Quixote decides that the world has no right to take away their freedom and sets them free. And what do the prisoners do as soon as they're freed? They throw stones at Don Quixote and Sancho and rob them. It's a tragicomic moment. His ideal of freedom clashes with the raw reality of human nature, but not even that stops him. The lesson isn't don't free prisoners. The lesson is freedom is complicated. The novel is ultimately a meditation on irony. Cervantes is the master of irony. Irony is saying one thing but meaning another. It's the gap between what is said and what is known. It's the language of modernity. Don Quixote is the first great ironic text. Cervantes teaches us to read between the lines. He teaches us that truth is rarely simple or direct. He teaches us to distrust grandiloquent narratives and absolute truths. He teaches us, in short, to think critically, and he does it without preaching to us. He does it by making us laugh. Laughter in Don Quixote is fundamental. It's a comedy from beginning to end. But it's a comedy with a touch of sadness. We laugh at Quixote, but we also laugh with him. And in the end, we feel a deep tenderness for him. Cervantes' humor isn't cynical humor that destroys, it's humanist humor that understands. Cervantes gives us permission to be ridiculous. He gives us permission to fail. He tells us that life isn't a heroic epic, but a comedy of errors, and that the only way to survive it is with a mix of idealism, realism, irony, and above all, compassion. And how does this story end? At the end of the second part, Don Quixote is defeated, not by a giant, but by one of his neighbors disguised as a knight, the Knight of the White Moon. He is defeated not by force, but by a trick. The condition of his defeat is that he must return to his village and cease being a knight-errant for a year. For Quixote, this is worse than death. It's the destruction of his identity. He returns home sick and defeated. Reality finally has conquered him. On his deathbed, the saddest and most beautiful scene unfolds. Don Quixote regains his sanity. He wakes one morning and declares that he is no longer Don Quixote de la Mancha, but Alonso Quijano, the good. He renounces the chivalric romances and asks for forgiveness. It's a devastating ending. The hero renounces his dream. Reality has won. But who is by his side weeping inconsolably? Sancho Panza, the realist. And Sancho begs him not to die, saying, "Do not die, your worship. Let us go out to the fields dressed as shepherds." Think about that. In that final moment, the roles have completely reversed. The madman has become sane and is ready to die. And the sane man has become a dreamer, offering him a new fantasy, a new fiction to keep living. The Quixotization of Sancho is complete. Alonso Quijano dies sane. But Cervantes, in his genius, ensures that the name that endures is Don Quixote. The world remembers the madman, not the sane one. It remembers the dream, not the reality. It's the ultimate triumph of idealism, precisely through its failure. What then is Cervantes' legacy? It is immense. Literally, every Western novel that came after is in some way a response to Don Quixote. Cervantes laid down the DNA of the novel. He created the archetype. 19th century novelists like Flaubert with Madame Bovary, who is a female Don Quixote, or Dostoevsky with The Idiot, Prince Mishkin is a Russian Quixote, were obsessed with him. They saw in Cervantes the master of human psychology. 20th century modernists like Borges or Kafka saw in him the master of metafiction, of the labyrinth between reality and dream. Borges claimed that he and Cervantes were the only two authors who had created, through their characters, universal archetypes. Cervantes taught us that a novel could be a mirror not to reflect reality flatly, but a strolling mirror, as Stendhal said, reflecting the mud of the road and also the blue of the sky. The mud is Sancho, the sky is Quixote. He taught us that compassion is the highest form of intelligence. He taught us that our flaws, our madnesses, and our failures are not something to hide, but are the very source of our humanity. He invented the modern novel not as a genre, but as a way to investigate the world, a way to ask questions without the arrogance of having all the answers. Don Quixote is not a book of answers, it's a book of questions. Cervantes lived a life of failures. He was a one-armed soldier, a ransomed slave, an imprisoned tax collector, and a writer who died poor. But from that failure, he gave us the greatest gift, the invention of an art and a character who teaches us how to live. He teaches us that even if the world is a cynical, cruel, and materialistic place, it's always worth fighting for the ideal. Even if it's on a skinny horse in rusty armor and with a squire who only thinks about eating, it's worth being, even just for a day, a knight-errant. In summary, reading Cervantes today is reading our own origin story. It's understanding that modernity was born from irony, from the dialogue between dream and reality, and from the deep acceptance of our imperfect and contradictory humanity. Don Quixote isn't the first modern book. It's the book that made us modern. So the next time you see someone fighting a lost cause or daydreaming, don't laugh so quickly. Perhaps you're looking at a direct descendant of Don Quixote de la Mancha, and perhaps the world needs a little more of that madness. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into Cervantes' world. It's been an honor to explore these ideas with you. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. If you enjoyed this analysis, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's your favorite moment from Don Quixote? Or what other literary giant would you like us to explore next? Until then, curious minds.